I opened my first investment account when I was 24, put in $300, felt like a genius. Checked it the next morning like I was expecting confetti and a phone call from Warren Buffett. My balance had gone up by 47 cents. 47 cents. I'd earned more than that finding change in my couch cushions the night before. So I kept going. $300 a month, every month, like everyone told me to. After 6 months, I had roughly $1,800 in contributions, and my total account balance was $1,860-something. The market had given me maybe $60 in gains. 6 months of discipline, 6 months of watching my paycheck shrink, and the grand reward was the equivalent of one mediocre DoorDash order. After a full year, my balance was around $3,700. The gains totaled maybe $150. $150 for an entire year of investing. I could have earned that working a single weekend shift at a coffee shop. I stared at my brokerage app and genuinely thought, this cannot be the thing that makes people millionaires. The math must be broken. The people who talk about compounding must be lying or delusional or already rich to begin with. I almost quit. I almost pulled every dollar out and put it toward a vacation. And if I had, it would have been the most expensive vacation of my life because I would have traded roughly $800,000 in future wealth for a week in Cancun. That's what this video is about. Not the math of compounding, because you can find that anywhere. This is about why compounding feels useless for so long that most people abandon it, the specific number where everything changes, and what has to happen in your brain before the numbers start working in your life. Let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand about compounding is that it's not lying to you. It's just honest in a way that feels insulting. When someone says, your money grows exponentially over time, that's technically accurate. But what they don't tell you is that the word exponentially includes a very long, very boring, very unrewarding beginning that looks nothing like growth. It looks like nothing. It looks like your money's sitting there doing almost nothing while you sacrifice lunch money to feed it. Here's the actual math because I want you to see it laid out plainly. Let's say you invest $500 a month into a total stock market index fund. The S&P 500 has returned roughly 10% annually over the last 100 years, according to historical data through February 2026. Some decades are higher, some are lower. 10% is the long-term average, including dividends reinvested. So we'll use that. After year one, you've contributed $6,000. Your balance is approximately $6,300. The market gave you about $300. That's your reward for an entire year of commitment. $300. You know what $300 feels like in 2026? About 2 weeks of groceries. It's nothing. It's insulting. Your brain looks at that number and files compounding under things that technically work but don't work for me. After year 3, you've put in $18,000. Your balance is about $20,900. The market has added roughly $2,900. Better, but still underwhelming. $2,900 over 3 years of consistent investing. You could have picked up extra shifts, done some freelance work, sold stuff in your garage, and earned that same amount in a couple of months. The contributions are still doing almost all the heavy lifting. Compounding is barely a rounding error. After year 5, you've contributed $30,000. Your balance is roughly $39,000. About $9,000 in market gains. Now it's starting to look like something, but $9,000 over 5 years still averages out to $150 a month in returns. $150 a month for 5 years of patience. Meanwhile, your coworker who didn't invest just bought a new TV with the money he would have saved, and he seems fine. He seems happy, actually. You start to wonder whether he's the smart one. This is the moment where most people stop. According to Fidelity data, the median 401k balance for workers under 35 is just $16,000. The median. That means half of young American workers have less than $16,000 saved for retirement. The average is pulled up to about $42,000 by a small percentage of aggressive savers, but the typical young worker is barely in the game. Most of them started and slowed down, or started and stopped entirely, because the first few years of compounding feel like shoveling sand into the ocean. And I get it. I lived it. The gap between what compounding promises and what it delivers in those early years is enormous. Every article, every YouTube video, every financial advisor says, start early, let compound interest do the work. Then you start early, and compound interest shows up to work in pajamas and takes a 2-hour lunch. You feel deceived. You feel like the whole thing is a scam designed for people who already have money. But here's what nobody explains. Compounding isn't linear. It's not even truly exponential in the way your brain imagines exponential. It operates on a curve that starts nearly flat, bends slowly upward for years, and then at some specific point in your journey, rips vertical so fast it will genuinely shock you. The question is where that point is. What's the number where compounding stops feeling useless and starts feeling like a freight train you can't slow down even if you tried? The answer, based on the math, is $100,000. $100,000 in invested assets is the tipping point. It's the threshold where the curve visibly bends. It's where your money starts earning more than you contribute. And once you cross it, everything about the compounding experience changes. Let me show you exactly why. If you have $100,000 invested and the market returns 10% in a given year, you earn $10,000 without contributing a single additional cent. $10,000. That's $833 a month in passive growth, sitting in your account, working for you while you sleep, eat, complain about your boss, scroll your phone, and do absolutely nothing productive whatsoever. At $500 a month in contributions, your money is now earning almost twice as much as you're putting in. The student has surpassed the teacher. The investment is now the primary engine of growth, and your contributions are just bonus fuel. Compare that to year one when you had $6,000 invested and the market handed you $300. At $6,000, your money earns $25 a month on average. You barely notice it. At $100,000, your money earns $833 a month. That's a car payment. That's your grocery bill. That's more than many Americans save in an entire month. Same market, same percentage. Completely different experience because the base is finally large enough for the percentage to produce a meaningful number. This is the thing about percentages that your brain gets wrong every single time. 10% of 6,000 is 600. 10% of 100,000 is 10,000. 10% of 500,000 is 50,000. The percentage doesn't change. The experience of the percentage changes dramatically. Your first few years feel pointless because 10% of a small number is a small number. But 10% of a large number is a life-changing number. The only variable that changed is how long you held on. Let me give you a real illustration with actual numbers, because I think this will hit differently. A woman named Tara starts investing $500 a month at 25. She earns an average of 10% annually. Here's what her balance looks like at key milestones. At 30, after 5 years, she has about $39,000. The total market gains are roughly $9,000. She's contributed $30,000. Her money has earned her the equivalent of 3 months of contributions. Feels slow. At 35, after 10 years, she has about $104,000. She's crossed the threshold. Her contributions total $60,000. The market has added about $44,000. Her gains are now almost as large as her contributions. The curve is bending. At 40, after 15 years, she has roughly $208,000. She's put in $90,000. The market has generated $118,000. Her gains have officially surpassed her contributions. The investment is doing more work than she is. The freight train has left the station. At 45, after 20 years, her balance is approximately $380,000. She's contributed $120,000. The market has generated $260,000. Her gains are now more than double her lifetime contributions. Compounding isn't helping anymore. Compounding is carrying. At 50, after 25 years, she has roughly $660,000. She's put in $150,000 over a quarter century. The market has produced over $500,000 in gains. She contributed $150,000. The market contributed $500,000. For every dollar Tara put in, compounding eventually added more than $3 on top. At 55, after 30 years, she has approximately $1.1 million on $180,000 in total contributions. The market has generated over $900,000. Tara is a millionaire on $500 a month, on a habit that felt completely useless for the first 5 years. And here's the part that genuinely keeps me up at night. If Tara had quit at year 3, when her balance was $20,900 and the gains felt laughable, she would have walked away from approximately $1.1 million. The cost of quitting during the boring years was over $1 million in future wealth. That's not a metaphor, that's the actual math. Now let me show you the flip side, because the timing math is even more brutal when you start late. A man named Jordan waits until he's 35 to start investing. Same $500 a month, same 10% average return. He has 20 years until 55. His balance at 55 is about $380,000. Not bad. But Tara, who started at 25, hits $380,000 at age 45, 10 years earlier. Same contribution amount, same market returns. The only difference is that Tara gave her money 10 more years on the front end, and those 10 years added about $720,000 to her final balance. $720,000 for doing nothing except starting earlier. This is what financial people mean when they say time is your greatest asset. They're not being poetic, they're being mathematical. Every year you delay costs you more than the previous year, because the curve gets steeper the further along you go. Year 1 of investing, you miss out on a few $100s. Year 20 of investing, you miss out on tens of thousands. The back end of the curve is where the wealth lives, and you can only access the back end by surviving the front end. But surviving the front end is the hardest part, because the front end is boring. The front end is discouraging. The front end is you watching your balance go from 3,000 to 3,047 and wondering whether this is really all there is. I want to talk about why the front end feels so terrible, because it's not just about the numbers. There's a psychological architecture to this that most financial content ignores entirely. Behavioral economists talk about something called hyperbolic discounting. It's the tendency for humans to prefer smaller rewards now over larger rewards later, especially when the larger reward is uncertain or distant. Your brain literally discounts the value of future money. $1 today feels worth more than $2 10 years from now, even though mathematically that's absurd. This is wired into your neurology. It's not a character flaw. It's a survival mechanism from a time when humans didn't live long enough for compound interest to matter. When you invest $500 and see it become $523 after a month, your brain does a rapid cost-benefit calculation. You sacrificed $500 of things you wanted right now. You received $23 that you can't even touch for decades. Your brain concludes that this is a terrible deal. The pain of the sacrifice is immediate, concrete, and real. The reward is distant, abstract, and uncertain. Of course it feels useless. Your brain is designed to feel exactly that way. There's a second psychological force working against you: social comparison. You're investing $500 a month. Your friend is spending $500 a month on restaurants, clothes, and experiences. At the end of the year, your friend has memories, photos, a tan, and new shoes. You have a brokerage statement showing $3,900 in gains that you're not allowed to spend. Who looks like they're winning? Your friend does. Every time. For years. Until one day, deep into the compounding curve, you have a 7-figure account and your friend has a storage unit full of things they bought to feel rich. But that day is 15, 20, 25 years away. And between now and that day, every brunch, every vacation, every new outfit your friend posts on Instagram is a small vote in favor of quitting. The third psychological force is what researchers call the absence of feedback. When you go to the gym, you see changes in the mirror within weeks. When you learn an instrument, you can hear yourself improving within months. When you invest, especially in the early years, there is almost no perceptible feedback. Your account balance barely moves. There's nothing to see, nothing to feel, nothing to reinforce the behavior. Humans need feedback loops to maintain habits. Compounding doesn't offer one for the first several years. It's like going to the gym every day for 2 years and looking exactly the same, then waking up one morning with the body of an Olympic athlete. That's essentially what happens with investing, except the timeline is even longer. So how do you survive the boring years? How do you keep investing when every signal your brain sends tells you to stop? The answer is automation and identity. Automation removes the decision. Identity removes the temptation. Let me explain both. Automation is straightforward. Set up an automatic transfer on the day after your paycheck hits. The money leaves your checking account before you see it, before you feel it, before your brain has a chance to hyperbolic discount it into a dinner reservation. If you have a 401k at work, increase your contribution by 1% today. You won't feel 1%. You will never notice it missing from your paycheck. But that 1%, compounded over decades, could represent an additional $100,000 or more in retirement assets. The Vanguard 2025 How America Saves report found that the average 401k contribution rate hit 7.7% of salary in 2024, with 45% of participants increasing their contributions from the prior year. Fidelity reported that the average combined savings rate, including employer matches, is now 14.1%. That's close to the 15% that most financial planners recommend. The people who reach those numbers almost universally do it through automation, through scheduled increases, through removing themselves from the equation entirely. They don't invest because they feel like it. They invest because the system does it whether they feel like it or not. Identity is deeper. This is the part most people miss entirely. The question isn't, should I invest this month? The question is, am I a person who invests? When investing becomes part of your identity, the boring years stop feeling like a sacrifice and start feeling like a confirmation. Every automatic transfer becomes a small vote for who you're becoming. You're not giving up $500. You're being the person who builds wealth quietly, patiently, without needing applause or a visible return to keep going. Patricia, the dental hygienist I've talked about in other videos, didn't invest for 28 years because she gritted her teeth through every single monthly transfer. She invested because that's who she is. It stopped being a decision decades ago. It's just the thing she does on the 15th of every month, like brushing her teeth or setting her alarm. There's one more number I want you to see, because it shows exactly how unfair the compounding curve becomes once you cross the $100,000 threshold. Getting from 0 to 100,000 is the hardest, slowest, most discouraging financial milestone you'll ever hit. At $500 a month and 10% returns, it takes roughly 10 years, a full decade. You contribute 60,000 of that yourself. The market adds about 44,000. You're doing most of the work. Going from 100,000 to 200,000 takes about 5 years, half the time. You contribute 30,000. The market adds roughly 70,000. The market is now doing more than twice the work you are. Going from 200,000 to 400,000 takes about 5 more years. Your contributions add 30,000. The market adds roughly 170,000. The market is now generating almost 6 times what you contribute. Going from 400,000 to 1 million takes about 6 more years. Your contributions add 36,000. The market adds roughly 564,000. Read those numbers again. The first 100,000 took 10 years. The last 600,000 took 6 years. The beginning is slow. The end is violent. The curve doesn't just bend. It breaks your expectations completely. This is why people who quit in year 3 are making the most expensive mistake of their lives. They're quitting during the only part of the journey where quitting feels rational. A Fidelity study showed that 401k balances hit record highs in late 2025, with the average balance reaching $146,400. Among long-tenured participants, workers who had been contributing consistently for 15 years or more, the average balance was significantly higher. These weren't high-income earners necessarily. They were consistent contributors who survived the boring years. They didn't time the market. They didn't pick stocks. They didn't do anything dramatic or glamorous. They showed up, contributed automatically, and let the curve do what the curve does after enough time passes. The 2026 contribution limit for a 401k is $24,500. That's just over $2,000 a month if you max it out. If your employer offers a match, you're potentially getting $30,000 or more per year flowing into a tax-advantaged account. A person who maxes out their 401k starting at 25 with a modest employer match can realistically reach $100,000 within 4 to 5 years. That moves the tipping point from age 35 to age 30. Every dollar of employer match you leave on the table is future compounding you'll never get back. Fidelity reported that 88% of 401k participants received an employer match in the fourth quarter of 2025. That's free money, literally free money, and every dollar of it compounds alongside your own contributions. Now, I want to address something I hear constantly, because it's the number one reason people give for not investing. I can't afford $500 a month. Fine. Let's run the numbers at $200 a month instead. Starting at 25, earning 10% annually, investing $200 a month for 30 years gives you approximately $452,000. You contributed $72,000 over 3 decades. The market generated $380,000. You're still a multi-hundred-thousandaire on $200 a month. That's the price of 4 DoorDash orders. That's 1 less subscription, 1 fewer happy hour, and a homemade coffee twice a week. Let's go even lower. $100 a month. Same 10%, same 30 years. You end up with roughly $226,000 on total contributions of $36,000. The market added $190,000. You put in $36,000 over your entire adult life and ended up with $226,000. That's a 528% return on your money. $100 a month. That's $3.33 a day. You spend more than that on a gas station energy drink. The problem was never that you couldn't afford to invest. The problem was that nobody showed you the math at the correct time horizon. But here's the other side of that math, and I need to be honest about this because it matters enormously. Compounding also works in reverse, against you. If you carry $6,500 in credit card debt at 22.4% APR, which is the current average, and pay only the minimum, the compounding of interest against your balance costs you over $9,000 in interest over 18 years. The same mathematical force that turns $100 a month into $226,000 in your favor will turn a $6,000 balance into a $15,000 prison when it's working against you. Total U.S. credit card debt crossed $1.277 trillion by the end of 2025. The average American carries about $6,500 in revolving credit card balances. That debt is compounding at 22%, while their investments, if they have any, are compounding at 10%. The spread between those two rates is the exact distance between building wealth and destroying it. Compounding doesn't care whose side it's on. It's an engine. It runs on whatever fuel you give it. Feed it investments, and it builds your future. Feed it debt, and it builds someone else's. This is the connective tissue that ties everything together, and it's the reason I keep coming back to something in every video I make. The difference between a person who builds wealth on a modest salary and a person who stays broke on a good salary is rarely about math. The math is simple. 10% average returns, time in the market, consistent contributions, spend less than you earn. A reasonably bright 12-year-old can understand the mechanics. The difference is always about understanding. People who build wealth understand at a visceral level what compounding actually does over 20 and 30 years. They don't just know the formula, they feel it in their bones. They can picture the curve. They've internalized the relationship between patience and outcome. And that internalization changes their behavior permanently because it transforms every spending decision from, do I want this thing, into, what is this thing going to cost me at age 60? That kind of understanding has a name: financial literacy. It's the thing that separates people who hear compounding and roll their eyes from people who hear compounding and feel genuinely excited. It's the thing that made Patricia contribute consistently for 28 years while everyone around her was financing BMWs and brunching their way through their 30s. It's the thing Tara has and Jordan didn't. The reason she started at 25 and he waited until 35, and it cost him $720,000. Financial literacy isn't complicated, but it's the starting line for everything I've described in this video. Without it, compounding is just a word, a concept you've heard but never felt, a promise that someone else collects on. With it, compounding becomes the engine underneath your entire financial life, running quietly in the background, turning $3.33 a day into $250,000, turning $500 a month into $1.1 million, turning the boring years into the most valuable years of your life, specifically because they're boring and you stayed anyway. The curve bends. It always bends, but only for people who are still there when it does. I opened that brokerage account at 24 with $300 and a lot of skepticism. The 47 cents the market gave me on day one felt like a joke. It was the most important 47 cents of my life because it was the first dollar that ever worked for me while I slept. That 47 cents has compounded every single day since. It doesn't look like 47 cents anymore. Yours won't either. But you have to start. And then you have to survive the boring part. And then one morning you'll check your account and the number on the screen won't make sense because it'll be larger than anything you contributed, larger than anything you expected, growing faster than you can even follow. That's the moment the curve breaks. That's the moment compounding stops feeling useless. It's coming. The math guarantees it. You just have to still be there.